Welcome, and let's jump into this game. So white starts with e4, very reliable move, fights for the center, and develops the bishop. And at the same time, we might be getting ready to make a pawn duo, so black usually shuts this idea down by playing c5, guarding the square, or as in this game, to play e5 to guard that square. And of course, if we go ahead and do the d4 plan, our queen would have to come out a little bit too early, and it could be easily attacked. Okay, so instead of that, usually people will play the move knight to f3. This move is getting ready to castle, and of course, it might be attacking that pawn. And so black usually wants to protect the pawn by playing knight to c6, that will protect it. And of course, they could also create some counterplay on our unprotected pawn. But most people simply protect the pawn. The knight attacks the pawn, a knight protects the pawn. That seems pretty balanced to me. Now, here, white has a lot of different ways to play the position, and in this game, white decided to play the oldest of the ideas, and that is to play bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez. And with this idea, of course, on some simple level here, we're now ready to castle. Right? We've moved the knight and the bishop out of the way, and of course, what is this bishop doing on b5? Well, it might be preparing to take out this knight, which, if you notice, is the key defender to that e5 pawn. Now, for kind of concrete reasons, we're not actually going to be able to take it and then win the pawn. For instance, if black played one of the most popular moves, pawn to a6, basically saying, I don't really believe your idea. You're going to lose a bishop for the knight. Like, I dare you to do it. And if we take it, and we might go, well, won a pawn. Unfortunately, black can get their pawn back with this nice double attack. We move the knight, and they got the pawn back. So it would actually be just a fancy trade if we were to try to win it right away in most of these positions. That being said, we're still sort of exerting the some pressure on the e-pawn. And so maybe in some variations, if black plays terribly, maybe it will work out, maybe we will take that pawn. And of course, we were just getting ready to castle. In this game, black plays an unusual defense, which is to simply reload the knight with knight to e7. Probably not the best move in the position on like some really high theoretical level, but definitely a solid idea. Now, if we ever take it, it'd be completely pointless because I would simply just replace the defender. And of course, we lost a bishop for the knight. Slightly bad deal for the white side. So knight e7 is an interesting defense, preparing to just replace his brother. The downside to this move is that the bishop on f8 is obviously a little bit upset about this roadblock that was just created, right? The bishop is now blocked by the knight. So with that in mind, white can play a bunch of ways since black is playing very passively, very, maybe you could also say very solidly. Okay, in this game, white decided to play pawn c3. Other moves could have been, good castle makes sense. You could play knight c3 makes sense. But in the game, pawn c3, I think it's an okay move. The idea, why would we play pawn c3? Right, and the main idea is so that we could maybe play d4 and have a very nice kind of pawn chain aiming towards the middle. And of course, we'd also be attacking their e-pawn. So this is the idea of playing pawn c3. You're preparing to send this d4 pawn or the d pawn to d4, and it'll be protected by the c3 pawn. Of course, some other people might say, well, isn't the other idea to get the queen out? Yes, but you probably don't want to get the queen out. So it's more like more about this pawn chain part of the idea. Okay, so after pawn c3, black plays pawn g6. Remember, we talked about how the bishop is blocked by the knight, so how to unblock it. Well, if I move the knight, then that will defeat the purpose of going there, right, to replace his brother. So we need to find another way for the bishop to come out, and that is to just fianchetto the bishop. You'll be on a very long diagonal. That looks quite nice. Of course, the downside to this is a very slow plan. And I don't know if the knight on e7 is very well placed. It has kind of one purpose, but on f6, it would have been a bit more centralized. Anyway, pawn g6 was played, getting ready for bishop g7, and now we follow through with the c3 move by playing d4. And of course, we are threatening to take the pawn for free, so black should probably do something about that, and usually black will take us, as in this case. Of course, we're going to take it back, and we prefer to take it back in a way that builds a large center. Wow, that's a very nice pawn duo. And I think I already prefer the white's position here. I wouldn't say white is won the game, but definitely white would be for choice, at least for me. Okay, black goes ahead and plays bishop g7, which is a bit of a risky move. With this unopposed center, white can at his pleasure, at his leisure, start attacking the knight, or start just kind of growing this space advantage further. You notice these pawns are on our side of the chessboard, the white side of the chessboard, and they could invade onto black's territory because black didn't put any pawns anywhere in the center, or at least none that have survived. So here black could start playing a move like d5. He could start putting some pawns in the center. Notice it's protected by the knight. You're threatening to maybe take the pawn in some positions. So I think maybe black should have played pawn to d5. In any case, he played in another interesting idea, which is to simply develop the pieces and get ready to castle. The only kind of real downside of this is that now, like we just talked about, the pawns can start harassing the pieces, the knights in this case, as they are not supported by any pawns, right? That would have been just blocking that idea altogether. Okay, so after d5, obviously we are attacking the knight, and the knight probably should either run away, or black will need to find a way to counterattack something of equivalent value as say his knight. So in the game, he decided to play pawn to a6, creating counterplay on our bishop, right? So we take the knight, they would just take a bishop, and probably that would be a little bit of a better deal for the black side. So with that in mind, we should probably save the bishop, and then we would be attacking the knight, and it would probably then save itself. So where to move the bishop? We could go to a4, we could go to c4, all these options. Probably would not want to go back home, but out of these other options, where would you guys choose to go? Right, it's not that easy to say exactly where we should go, but we can definitely eliminate the somewhat bad options, and that is we can eliminate the option to go bishop to a4. Now, usually we do want to go bishop a4 in these positions. Whenever a pawn is harassing a bishop and the bishop must move, you usually want to move back and kind of keep eyeing whatever the bishop was targeting over there. But in this case, it would simply walk into this pawn avalanche, and wherever we save the bishop, the knight can harass us further. If we go to bishop b3, they'll go knight a5, and our bishop will have to move again because it's worth more than a knight, so we'd have to dodge that attack. And if we go bishop to c2, probably they can just attack us with knight b4. And again, we're going to be moving our bishop again, and notice that they also kind of dodged this for free since we've been moving the bishop, from b5 to a4 for there's too many moves with the bishop. So, of course, this wouldn't be a losing position for white, but it feels rather strange to walk into all these tempos, on your bishop. So we can probably just get rid of this bishop a5 move, and that leaves us with bishop c4, bishop d3, and bishop e2. Again, we probably would not really consider going back home, so we'll just take that off. And bishop c4 would be kind of the other move that you'd want to do. You're still kind of potentially aiming at the black side of the board. But again, this is just hit by this pawn. And now you have to move back to one of the squares you could have gone to in one move. So yeah, bishop c4 doesn't make as much sense again. It wouldn't be a losing mistake. So that really just leaves us with bishop to d3 and bishop to e2 as our choices. I suppose he chose bishop e2 because maybe on bishop d3 you could be harassed again by knight to b4 in some positions. I'm not sure it'd be a good idea to do it, but anyway, we just completely dodge all that by playing bishop to e2. And now that our bishop is safe, we are going to take that knight if it doesn't move. So that explains why they moved the knight. You wouldn't want to move the knight back home. And I think knight to b4, probably just pawn to a3. There's no forward movements for the piece. And in fact, in this position, the knight would be trapped. So really, there's only this forward option to consider, protected by the bishop, or to retreat. And retreating just feels wrong. You just definitely be not a really human decision. So if it's safe, people would rather go forward. That's what happens here. And now, okay, we could just develop a piece, but I like this move as well. We can just take. And the reason is in the future, we can perhaps play pawn to f4. Maybe also that we've lured the bishop away from the king side. Maybe in the future we can play bishop to h6, not right now because b2 is hanging, but in some future variations. So that's why it might make sense to play knight takes e5, the move that we just saw, right? Takes, because now that bishop can be harassed, and also the bishop was guarding the king. The king's probably going to be living there in a second. So I like this move the white found. White played knight c3, and just look at this excellent position. Our pawn is dominating. Already it's in black's territory, and it's quite obnoxious there. It's supported by this very strong pawn. The knight is well placed. The bishop, okay, it's not the best bishop in the world, but hey, that still looks like a good diagonal to me. This bishop looks great. It's threatening maybe to go to bishop h6. And what does black have to show for all these problems? I'm not really sure. So I would definitely want to choose the white side. Okay, to be fair, the game is not over though. Black played pawn to d6, and yeah, I would probably castle here because bishop h6 might be coming up, and it might be a little bit hard to castle if that happens. So I think I would want to castle here. Of course, there's nothing actually wrong with pawn to d6, but okay, I would be getting a little bit worried about bishop to h6 right now. Unfortunately, right now, it might not be the optimal time to play it because you could be simply evicted with knight to g8. And no, we can't go in because it would be captured. And, it looked great, but it's just going to be driven back. And then maybe, they can fix their knight. And maybe we could get some sort of repetition going there. That'd be kind of a funny way to get a draw. Okay, so perhaps this is not the right time to go bishop h6. But it's kind of coming up if black doesn't do something about it. Okay, so if we're not ready for bishop h6, what should we do? Well, why don't we castle? Why don't we develop more pieces? And I think that makes a lot of sense. Now here, black is still, in the game. And I think maybe I would play bishop to g7 because, like we've been saying, there's sort of this threat to go bishop h6 and start attacking all these squares. And now, obviously, bishop g7 would shut that easy idea right down. And okay, I still like white's position because of the space advantage, but perhaps, there's still going to be a game. White will still have to find a way to actually make this advantage into a win. Instead of that, black played, I would say maybe a mistake. Well, that might be a bit too harsh, but I definitely don't like this next move, which is he played pawn to c5. Okay, one of the problems for black is that he has only 2 pieces developed, and white has a bit more than that, right? In fact, he has double. Depending if you count the king as being developed, it's off the starting square. I would count it. I would understand if you don't count that. Okay, but in any case, we have more pieces developed than black, and I think black should start trying to fix that problem. And, you know, the move bishop g7, the one we just looked at, okay, it's not a developing move, but it would be a move that prepares to develop, because I'd patch up all these weaknesses near the king, and then you could probably castle on the next turn. So it'd be a preparation for this. c5 actually, okay, I mean, the idea is that we're getting more space on the queen side, so it looks very nice. But the problem with it is it just doesn't, fix any of the non-developed pieces. And also, it allows white to emphasize his lead in development. So what is the strategy that we should play when we are ahead in development? What would you do for white? Yeah, and that's right. When we're ahead in development, right, we have more pieces off the starting square than our opponent. One of the ideas we should play is, can we trade the pawns? Can we open the position? And this c5 move allows white to start opening the position, which should be favorable for him because he has more pieces off the starting squares than black does. So I think c5 actually helps white execute this plan. That is to trade the pawns, open the position. So I think already black is in a bit of trouble. Okay, they take back with the pawn. Obviously, they have to take back their the pawn that we captured, and they have these two choices. They could take with the knight or the pawn. Maybe taking back with the knight is like a little bit better, but it feels terrible because now this pawn is an isolated pawn. There's no cheap defenders, and does black really want to babysit it for the rest of the game with his expensive pieces? Probably not. So that's why he probably chose to take with the pawn, and now there's some little chances they could, protect each other cheaply. So, okay, there we go. And now I think there's a few good moves for white, but the main one is, what does our opponent want to do? Well, he would probably want to castle, and now we can just stop that by playing bishop to h6. And now it's going to be quite illegal to castle. Let's see what the computer lets me do it. Nope, not going to let me do it because that's an illegal move. So I think already black is struggling, and probably he needs to try that knight g8 idea, because this would be an attempt to drive the bishop back, and then maybe he can try to again prepare to castle by moving the knight away. And then of course we probably don't want to draw, so we would probably have to give up on our bishop h6 idea, because we're better even if they were castled, our space advantage and all this. Okay, but unfortunately for black, he doesn't play knight g8, which admittedly is a very strange move to play. It's a very unnatural feeling to go back with your knight, but perhaps that's what he should have done, or maybe he should have at least developed some other pieces. Maybe, hey, I could try to develop the rook. I'm not sure you'd even take this pawn, but it's trying to do something with all these pieces that are inactive here. All these pieces that are not being used. I think black should try to do something with these pieces. In the game, he played pawn to d5. The idea is that if we take this pawn, now they could play knight to f5, and our bishop that was doing so well stopping the castling is now just being driven right back home. And no, you can't go to g5 because the queen's there. We're going all the way back here, and wow, black has actually reconquered the center. He's getting ready to castle. Maybe maybe black has found a way to keep himself in the game. Okay, of course we're not gonna mess this up and allow that knight to go to f5 and kick us out. So instead, we're going to further develop our pieces. And here we find the move queen to d3. Other moves were definitely possible. We could create some little pins over here like this. right? They can't castle to get out of the pin. That would make sense. And then I would also be preparing to get the rook into the middle. Right? The queen and our rook are the only pieces we haven't moved. So finding some way to develop them would finish our development and put us on the road to taking this advantage that we have and maybe bringing it to actually winning the game. So, okay, anyway, queen d3 was played. It's still a great move, developing the pieces. Excellent job. And, okay, again, you know, maybe black again needs to find this very uncomfortable move to play. Who wants to play knight to g8? Absolutely no one. But I don't know of another idea to get ready to castle over here. And then, of course, you can't castle over here, or you probably would not want to, because that house is completely gone. All those pawns have already been pushed or taken. So that wouldn't make sense. Really, black needs to be finding some way to get over here. And that knight g8 idea is the only way I could see to even attempt to do that. But yeah, black doesn't play that move because that just is so ugly looking to go knight g8 here. So, okay, he decided to play bishop b6, developing the piece and supporting the center, but it just doesn't do anything to solve this problem. In the long run, if black doesn't find a way to castle, he's basically just playing without this rook. Right? It can go here. Okay, that's pointless. Here, what does that do? Here, it will just be captured. And even if it isn't captured, it's just attacking a pawn. So basically, until black figures it out, he's just down a rook for all practical purposes. And now white goes for this idea where, okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces developed. You have only 3. And more importantly, I don't know how you're going to activate 2 of these pieces. So what do I do when I'm ahead in development? Yeah, that's right. We try to open the position. What does that mean? We try to trade the pawns. Now, you might say, okay, there's a pawn trade right there. But again, that might allow for knight f5 in the near future. So kind of like the generality probably doesn't work in the long run. Like, okay, right now, of course, I can't go knight f5. But, you know, they will take it first. And then maybe knight to f5 is coming up. That pawn was prohibiting knight to f5. So maybe this would be, I mean, I think I would still want to be the white side here, but maybe this is a little bit annoying for concrete reasons. So for that reason, we should maybe try to play for f5 or something like this. And in the game, pawn to f4 was played. A great move, because now maybe we can play f5 in some positions, and obviously there's this tempo. And it's kind of weird, but where's this bishop going? If it takes this, obviously we'll just take it back. That's embarrassing. No one will play that badly. If you go back to bishop to f6, what would we do here? How could we open the position? And again, open the position means trade the pawns. And again, we might not want to do this one because at some point it gives them that knight f5 square. So find another way to open the position. Yeah, and that's right. We can just push on with f5. And if they take us, we could just take it. And now you can see, like, when I go rook to e8, or sorry, rook to e1, now the rook will just be on this nice open line. There's a giant hole over here, and this would be, you know, the end of the game. So going back, after f4, instead of moving the bishop, they throw this check in, but the check doesn't do very much. We simply get out of the way. And no, we don't care about this move, because we would just simply take the bishop. Probably other winning moves are possible here, but I don't see what's wrong with just taking a free piece. So, okay, we're not going to be worried about that. But again, where else to move? Okay, they need to move the bishop. Where to move the bishop? Obviously, that wouldn't be a safe move. So, yeah, it's quite tough to see what they will what they would try to do. In the game, they try to kind of delay this decision by creating counterplay, and they take on e4. This is not a great move because, again, that's what we were supposed to be doing, right? White is more pieces developed. White wants to trade the pawns. And so it's kind of funny to see that black is doing our job for us. To be fair, though, black is, probably busted, and it's just hard to come up with good moves when you're in trouble. I mean, black is quite a good grandmaster. He obviously knows he's in trouble, but there's just no easy ways out. That being said, this is probably still not a good idea to do white's job for him. Okay, of course, we're going to take this pawn back, and of course, so save our queen. So taking it back, this gets the knight into all these hopping positions. Okay, right now we're not going to do them probably, but it's still getting closer to the black side. So it's just a nice move. And again, do we care about if they take on b2? They could take either way, I guess, right? Okay, well, the easy one, if they take with the queen, again, oops, the piece is hanging. So what if they take with the bishop? That would dodge this, and it would seemingly create an attack on our rook. Huh. This wasn't played in the game, because it would be a losing idea. But why? What should we do for white? Yeah, and that's right. We actually have a lot of ideas, but the first one to consider is simply activating our pieces. Our rook over here was never used in the game, and now we come in, and there's a pin over here where they're threatening knight d6, and perhaps we could have even played it on the last turn. All of our pieces have been activated. This is really just game over. There's nothing really to do here. In the long run. So perhaps rook b1 would be good. Another good move, like I was saying a second ago, is that we can just play knight d6 check, and wherever they move their king, they're going to walk into a discovered attack. So let's say if they go king d7, now we just need to think, what's the best way to use our discovered attack? Probably have a lot of ideas to do it. We could take on f7, which would win this rook. We could go knight c4, which would win the queen. Right, we could even just develop our piece and just kind of keep that threat in the air. For me, I think I would win the queen. I don't know if it's the best move, but it definitely seems like good enough to win a free queen, or a queen for a knight. Okay, in the game, that explains why they didn't take our pawn, and instead they tried some more counterplay. Right, so they played rook a d8. Sorry. This rook is not connected, so it's just rook to d8. And, where should we move our queen? Yeah, hopefully you weren't too tempted by winning this pawn. It is a winning idea, and it would be definitely a good move. But seeing how this king is stranded in the center, I'm not really sure how he's going to find a way to castle. For that reason, we might want to keep the queens on the board. Our queen has more potential damage that it could do to the uncastled king than their queen could do to our more protected queen. So it might make sense to keep the queens on the board. Again, winning free material is not a bad idea. Unfortunately, it does allow some trades, so perhaps that's not going to be the best idea for the white side. Seeing as we have, kind of like checkmating chances coming up. So yeah, white found a great way to keep the queens on the board. I would say even a shocking way, and that is to play queen to a3. Amazing move. I mean, this is why white is one of the youngest grandmasters in history. To find a move like queen a3, especially when you're so young, is just a sign of talent, and of course hard work as well. So why is queen a3 such an impressive move? Well, it looks like a blunder, doesn't it? Just get you double attacked. how is queen a3 a good move? You just get one move double attacked. Well, what's interesting is that if this double attack was played, it wasn't. Black is a much better player than this beginner idea. But, you know, if it was played, what would we do here? Yeah, and we have this shocking move, because you might go, well, my queen's hanging, I'm going to move the queen, even if it costs me a rook or whatever. But actually, the better move is just developing the rook. And you might say, my queen's hanging, and I thought we just said we didn't want to trade the queens, right? I take the queen, you take my queen, sorry, let's try that again. You take my queen, and I thought we just talked about we don't want to trade the queens. And actually, yeah, you're right, we don't want to trade the queens. But we actually have a much better move if this had happened, better than taking our queen back. Who can find how to put this game away? One move checkmate. Yeah, actually we have a very funny checkmate with knight to f6. That bishop was the defender of the f6 square, and without that guy there is a checkmate. We have the knight guarding the d7 square and the bishop guarding this square, and there's yeah, it's just a very funny checkmate. Of course, black is a grandmaster, so he's not going to fall for something like this, but still, it really explains why queen a3 is such a great move. Also, it does keep an eye on this knight, which we'll see is very important in just a second. Of course, this bishop is still hanging, and now it's finally time to actually move that piece. So it goes bishop to d4. That's the only safe square, because we already talked how bishop b2 is just met by rook ab1. So bishop to d4 is kind of all you have left, right? Knight f6 is guarding the f6 square, and bishop is guarding that. Okay, so we have to go bishop d4, and okay, I think there's a lot of ways to win here, and that's kind of based on the fact that they're just unable to castle. One of the ways that I really like is just to put the rook in the middle, and then we have all of our pieces developed. That would look really nice. In the game was bishop g5. Probably it's even a stronger move, but okay. The reason this is such a nice move is that obviously we're creating a checkmate in one threat. Yes, they can castle now, but they would simply lose a free piece. And at the grandmaster level, that is just game over. There's nothing left to talk about. So, oh, you know, it's funny. Maybe we could even take it with bishop takes, because that would be losing a free piece and a double attack, just to make it even worse. So that would be, it'd just be a losing move. So, okay, what to do? We have to stop the one move checkmate. So black decided to play pawn c5. That would cut off the queen from attacking the knight. Okay, that's fine. Now we have a lot of moves again for white. Most of them are winning because our position is just so one-sided, such domination. Again, I really like just getting all my pieces into play, but white finds an even better move, and that's just to start going for the kill. Knight f6 is a check, and we're just gonna kind of start embarrassing the king. You forgot to castle. Let's start putting this away. Well, if they go king f, right, they have only two moves. They can either go king f8 or they can take us. If they go king f8, we have, again, this really funny checkmate with the knight and the bishop. Too bad that wasn't actually played on the board, but of course black is not a beginner. He's not going to get one move checkmated. So instead he took the knight. Obviously we're going to take it back, and of course that is a free tempo on the rook. They're going to have to move the rook out of the way. If they tried to castle, we would just take this, and not only would we get a free piece, we'd also just get a double attack as well, if that wasn't bad enough for black. So that means no castling allowed, and now we should probably move the rook. But now if we move the rook, we'll never castle, and of course the rook is pointless here, pointless there, and it really had only the way to activate would be in the center. but the king is there. Okay, basically black is just down a rook now. For the rest of the game, I like how white wrapped up the game. He simply brought in a piece, and yeah, we can just see that this piece is essentially just off the chessboard. And so the game doesn't last too much longer, and there's no real educational value in the next moves because white is just winning by so much. We'll quickly see how it wraps up. They play here to attack our bishop. We simply save it, and now they're trying to castle by hand, but it's just too slow of an idea. Bishop f3, tempo, take, and take. And then black finds a kind of creative move, threatening our back rank checkmate if we were to grab that free piece. Oops. So, right, black is a tricky player. He is a grandmaster, but so is white, and so that trick just isn't going to cut it. It's not going to work. Just take, queen e3 first. Now I can take this because of check. Now I can just simply block, and I would be up a piece. So now you probably have to do something about that. Also, in many positions, now I can go queen e7, guarded by the bishop. Maybe bishop e7 guarded by the queen. So queen e3 is just a nice centralizing move. Guards the back rank, and again, prepares to just play rook takes. If you move the bishop out of the way, though, then we have probably a lot of ideas such as queen to e5, cutting the king off from going to this king g7 escape square, and in some future point we can go rook to d8 after that, and that looks like it'd be game over to me. So instead of that, maybe black should just resign, but instead he decided to play a couple extra moves. He plays g5. Of course, when we take it, his kind of hope is that at some point, somehow this will be meaningful, but it just isn't going to be. Queen c6 was played. As you can see, there's kind of this last little hope. Props for black for not giving up. And maybe there's some time issues. Unfortunately, the file doesn't have the time controls, like the minutes and seconds broken down as they're playing this game. But in any case, the king on f8 is just not where you're supposed to have a king. And we're going to see that kind of brought home. Queen check, move, another check, and okay. And now here he just takes, he just trades to winning endgame. I think I would play queen f7 because I think I like this sort of attacking ideas more, and that looks completely winning, right? If they take your bishop, it's just checkmate with queen takes h7. But okay, anyway, it's your choice how you'd like to win a game, and obviously these grandmasters are very good at their endgames, so they're good at assessing when to bring this home. And I think around here they resigned. Black resigned already, because if they had played it out, doesn't matter where the king will go, because when I trade, the king will have to take it back. And now we just have 3 pawns on the king side versus 1. So we are going to make a breakthrough. Go here, get the king into the middle, go here, go here, go here, go here. And one of these pawns is going to become a queen. And if it doesn't, because their king will blockade, the king will be stuck over guarding our pawns. And then we'll just grab these pawns and make a queen. So we just, with our extra pawns, someone's going to become a queen. And it really is just game over. Black decided not to play this part of the game out, so he had already resigned. Beautiful game. White basically just won from beginning to end without really any real issues. So very impressive game, which led to white becoming one of the youngest grandmasters in history. All right, thank you. I hope you guys can join me for the next video. I'll see you guys next time.